This episode of Inside EMS is brought to you by Lexipol, the experts in policy, training, wellness support, and grants assistance for first responders and government leaders. To learn more, visit lexipol.com. That's LEXIPOL.com. What's up, everybody? It's time to go inside EMS. I am your host, Chris Cebollero. Kelly Grayson is on special assignment, doing whatever it is that Kelly Grayson does on his special assignment. But I am going to fly solo today and bring you the greatest and latest episode of the Inside EMS podcast. You know, I got to tell you, even after all these years of being in EMS, I still want to learn, and I still want to be able to develop into the best paramedic that I could be and the best leader that I can be, right? And I've got some folks that I follow on EMS One who are really great authors that really kind of spur interest in, EMS topics. And it's really, really hard when you start to think about how are we going to teach the next generation, because it seems that every little thing has been done. Every subject has been talked about, has been written about, has been given a different spin. But you know what? I think that there are still some authors out there that make those articles very, very entertaining. And there was one that I read by Tim Nowak. He is a EMS One columnist. And in the middle of May of 2024, he wrote an article, 11 Keys to Success for the Rookie EMT. And, he breaks it down to say, breaking down some of the lighthearted and professionally serious tips to start and build a successful EMS career or a career in EMS. And I really enjoyed reading it. And I thought maybe it'd be time just to kind of highlight some of those points and kind of talk about it, because I think Tim really kind of lays out the some of the nuances that we forget. And I think that when we talk about this isn't just for the new EMT. It could be for the new paramedic. It could be for the incumbent paramedic. As we now start to go on in our careers, we get a little bit of complacency. We get a little bit of boredom. We get a little bit of dislike for our career field. One of the things that we have to remember is we need to be able to motivate ourselves to become the best professional that we can be. And this is one of the things that I've talked about a lot on this show, is you never allow anybody else to dictate your level of professionalism. Because remember, you need a recommendation when you leave this job, or you don't want to be getting corrective action because of an attitude problem. And you really want to be able to ensure that nobody dictates your level of professionalism as you go on in any career that you have, whether it's EMS, whether it's nursing, whether it's being a doctor, whether it's being a janitor. You need to be able to ensure that you do your job better and cleaner than the next guy, and that this allows you now to become the very best that you can be. But as we now look at this, one of the things that is the number one tip is carry a pen, carry your shears, carry a flashlight. This is a really great tip, right? Even though we may be getting away from using pens in EMS, you would be surprised back in the old days before electricity, how many people forgot to carry a pen or didn't have a pen or needed to borrow a pen. And do you have an extra pen? Yeah, I'm all set. Thanks very much. And one of the things that we want to be able to think about is our trauma shears and our flashlight is something that we will need possibly every single day. A pen, maybe. But one of the things that I think is important here as well is to add, it's not only carry a pen, not only carry shears, not only carry a flashlight, but it's clean them after you use them along with your stethoscope. I mean, we put these devices on people's body, our stethoscope. We grab a flashlight and we grab our trauma shears with gloved hands that may have been contaminated. And then we go ahead and put them back in our pockets and we just grab them again the next time. Maybe we grab our shears without gloves on the next time so we can open a bag of sunflower seeds or whatever the heck it is. Same thing with our flashlight, same thing with our stethoscope. So it's not only carry, but make sure that you're doing the due diligence that you need to make sure that you are cleaning them after you use them. Number two, I love number two, learn where everything is. One of the things that I used to do as a best practice when I sat in the back of an ambulance, whether I was on the bench seat or whether I was in the captain's seat, is I would close my eyes and drop my head, and I would reach for things as if I needed them when I was dealing with a patient. So this way I knew exactly where everything was on the action wall, or I knew where everything was in the cabinets. And this is very important because when someone needs you and needs your ability and needs your knowledge and needs your skill, you don't need to be looking for, the OB kit. You don't need to be looking for trauma dressing. You need to know where everything is, and you need to be able to put your hands on it without looking if you can. I mean, that's really a best practice. I challenged myself to learn where everything was in the ambulance, that when I needed it, I didn't have to worry about where it was. I was just able to reach for it and put my hands on it. Now, sometimes I grabbed the wrong thing. I had to throw it back and look to see where I was grabbing, but I tried to be able to do that. Another one that I had a big challenge of is this happened really when I was in Fort Worth, Texas, when I was a paramedic at MedStar in Fort Worth. Learn where you're going. And one of the things back in those days is we didn't have GPS yet. We were using Mapsco books, and we had to be able to follow our route. And I would get lost all the time. I would, on my days off, I would go and drive different, areas that we would cover, and I would try to learn. And one of the things that was really helpful to me is I started to put myself in the position of where are the highways compared to where I was in the cities, right? Because at MedStar in Fort Worth, you not only ran Fort Worth, but you ran 13 surrounding cities as well. And one of the things that was important for me was when I got off the highway, I knew that the highway was behind me, or I knew that the highway was to my right or left. And this way, when I opened up the book and I was able to see where the highway was, I was able to put myself in a position of put myself in a direction and position that I was able to say, okay, the highway is to my right, which means if I want to go west, I need to continue going down this street. But now, in the days of Google Maps and GPS, it might be a little bit easier, but that still doesn't take away from your knowledge of where you need to be and where you're going to get to. So I think that that's another great tip that Tim throws in this article. Um, One of the things that's really interesting for his number fourth tip is know your equipment and how they operate. And I think that that's something that's really, really important. When's the last time you used, whatever it is, come up with something. We had real splints that were on our trucks for a long time, and we may not use a real splint. We could use it for traction. We could use it for immobilization. And every so often, I would have to take that out and I would look at it and I would play with it. Then they came out with the Real Splint Junior, and that was used for more pediatric patients. But if I wanted to, I could go ahead and use the Junior on an upper limb injury, on an arm injury, which really allowed me for immobilization of the upper arm or anywhere on the arm. But when's the time that we're going to use that equipment? When's the last time you took a piece of equipment out and you used it? Sometimes it may not hurt that when you're waiting for a call to go up to your equipment, pull it out and play with it and use it and make the determination of what's the best way that you're going to be able to use this if you need it. Stair chairs were always important. We used to take stair chairs with us everywhere we went. And it seems now that people are eager to let people walk to the ambulance. Well, I got to tell you, there's a big liability in that. And we have to be able to remember if people are sick, if people aren't feeling well, if people need to get into the ambulance and we're making them walk, we take on that liability as an organization, and you take on that liability as a provider. So something that you need to keep aware of. Number 5 is know and learn what you don't know. Oh my God, I love this. And I wish this really would have been a little bit towards the top. Because one of the things that I've been saying for a lot of years is in EMS, we are taught to be linear thinkers. If A happens, do B. If B happens, do C. And then as we continue along in our career, we have to be able to become critical thinkers, and we have to be able to learn the things that we don't know. We have to be able to admit the things that we don't know. If we know that pediatrics is a challenge for us, what is your responsibility into learning pediatrics and ensuring that when a mother hands you a 3-month-old that's in cardiac arrest, you know everything to do about that arrest. A mother has given you her most precious gift, her child, who is in cardiac arrest, and now it's your job to do that. You know, in paramedic school, they teach us a lot of stuff, and they do that in a year. And we think that when we leave paramedic school, we should know everything there is to know about EMS. I've been doing this well over 30 years, and I can tell you that I don't know everything there is to know about EMS. And I've tried hard to learn as much as I could about being the best paramedic that I could be. But you need to be able to understand you do not know everything. And if you know everything there is to know about EMS, raise your hand and then teach the rest of us that don't know everything there is to know about EMS. But here's the problem. EMS is a very egotistical business. And I've said this on this show hundreds of times, but I keep repeating it over and over because it's still important today, is that EMS is an egotistical business. And it's the egotism that keeps us from asking the question why, because we don't want to look like we don't know what we're talking about in front of our peers. But you need to be able to understand, where is your strength as an EMS provider? Is it trauma? Is it cardiology? Is it respiratory? Is it medical? Is it pediatrics? Is it, whatever? Then you have to be able to determine, where are you lacking? Maybe it's pediatrics, so we don't get those calls as much as we should, or we weren't taught as much as we needed to do. You have to be able to find a way that you can learn, and the best way for you to learn, and the best way for you to grab that knowledge. Then the next thing that I will encourage you to do is share that knowledge with somebody else and say to them, hey, you know what I just realized about magnesium sulfate? And you may not be embarrassed to do that, because people will say, well, yeah, I knew that about magnesium sulfate. Well, you know what? I didn't. So how come you didn't tell me about it then, right? With your partner, whoever it is. But you need to be able to ensure, and you need to be able to take pride in knowing everything there is to know about your strengths, knowing everything there is to know about your challenges or weaknesses, and you need to be able to turn those challenges or weaknesses into strength. It's okay. You don't know everything there is to know about EMS, and you can continually learn. I used to think that I was great in cardiology, and I started reading more about cardiology. Then I bought a book called Primary Cardiology. It was a cardiologist book. And I tried to understand some of that medicine, or some of that cellular level information, that I just had no idea what the heck they were talking about. What did I do? I found a person who was a cardiologist. I asked if I could sit with them every so often. I wound up sitting with them, once a quarter, and we would just talk about things, and it was a great opportunity to learn. So number 5, I have spent the most on number 5: know and learn what you don't know. But even polish what you do know, right? So it's important that you learn what you don't know. But if you don't know it, how are you going to put yourself in that position? I feel like I'm babbling, but this is an important one. And this is really one that develops your reputation. There was a friend of mine, his name was Jerry Young, and Jerry was a gentleman who worked in the restaurant field for all his career. And then later in his life, he had to have been in his mid to late 40s. He became a paramedic. And Jerry was somebody who took pride in wanting to be the best paramedic that he could be. And if he didn't know something, I remember him and I were working at the Texas Ranger game when we were working in Arlington, Texas. We had the contract for the Texas Rangers, and we were just talking about something, and I don't remember what it was right now. And he didn't understand it. And the next day when he came in, we were at the ball game again for the next game. He knew an incredible amount of information. When he went home that night, and the next day he spent reading the Merck manual and reading his paramedic book, and he came in with a realm of or a ream of information that he didn't know the night before. And that was very impressive to me. That was very inspiring to me, that he just wanted to learn. So, all right, that's enough about number 5. I think I just beat that to death. And his number 6, Tim's number 6 tip, is never settle for the minimum. Whether it's the standard of patient care, compassion, continuing education hours, there is a minimum and there is a maximum. There is a floor and there is a ceiling. And you want to be able to get as much information as you can. One of the things when I was earlier on in my EMS career, I would say that I wasn't the best paramedic. I wasn't very compassionate. And it was really those jarring life events that take you by the shoulders and shake you that say, if you don't know everything there is to know about EMS and you can't take care of people, someone would die and it would be your fault. And that's a big burden to put on yourself, man. I mean, when you sit there and you say, I've got to know everything I can, that when a mother hands you a 3-month-old that's in cardiac arrest, that I could do the best job that I can and try to cheat death. It really comes down to the lid, and when we think about your knowledge, you're capped at what you know. You're capped at what you don't know. You're capped at what you think you know, but you just need to keep on learning and become the very best that you can be. And then from there, you need to be able to start to write, and you need to be able to start to speak, and you need to be able to start to research. You need to be able to start to teach people. When you think about the people who are teaching at state conferences, when you think about the people who are teaching at national conferences, these are people who have taken the time to learn as much as they can about the subject they're trying to teach you. And these are the best of the best people who are getting these opportunities to teach at these conferences. Well, why can't it be you? I can't count the number of people who are telling me, Chris, how do I teach? I want to teach at the state level. I want to teach at the national level. And, I started off this podcast by saying, it's something, a lot of the information that we read and a lot of the information that we see is just regurgitated. It's just different spins on it. That's what you have to be able to make the determination. What is your love? What is your passion in EMS? What have you learned that you think will be of value to other people to help them learn those things? But when you think about minimums and maximums and floors and ceilings, you really want to be towards the top, because the people that gravitate towards you as a teacher, somebody that has knowledge, somebody that has skill, someone that has ability, you now become that role model. You now become that mentor. You now become that national teacher, that you can now take the knowledge that you've spent a lot of time, and there's a lot of value in that knowledge, right? There's a lot of value in what you're learning. And we have to remember that as we learn this value, if we don't share it with other people, we do them a disservice. And that's something that we really need to be able to pay attention to. Number 7, Tim tells us to remain ambitious. This is another one that I want to be able to say. It makes no difference if you're a new EMT or a new paramedic or a tenured EMT or a tenured paramedic. You always want to stay ambitious. Maybe EMS isn't your career for the long run. And one of the things we think about, is EMS a career field or is EMS a stepping stone? Well, in my career, I've determined that it is a stepping stone, that people use it to get into the fire department, or they get into it to get into nursing school or medical school. And I think that that's okay. But we have to be able to remember that we are going somewhere in our career as a 22-year-old paramedic, as a 25-year-old EMT. We are going to be 50 and 60 years old one day. And if you're lucky enough that you don't have to work in your 50s and 60s, God bless. But we're going to be doing something else, whether it's EMS. There was a partner of mine that was my EMT, and they left the job after about 3 or 4 years that we were partners, and he went and opened up a convenience store, a package store. In Ohio, they're called package stores, where you can drive through the building and say, hey, give me a 6-pack of beer and give me those 2 chips and blah, blah, blah. He bought one of those when he was probably 30 years old, and he opened up, or he, went into the package store business or the convenience store business, whatever you want to call it. I saw him about 10 years later, and he owned 4 package stores instead of just 1. So his career became entrepreneur, business owner, whatever that was. But I asked him what the secret was to his success, and he goes, it was the drive. I just didn't want to have 1. I wanted to have 2. Then when I had 2, I just didn't want to have 2. I wanted to have 3. So in your career, if EMS is where you're going to be the best that you can be and remain ambitious. If you're going to do something else, or if you don't know that EMS is your career, you want to be able to ensure that you are remaining ambitious, because you're going to be a nurse, you're going to be a chief nurse, you're going to be a CNO, or you're going to be a nurse manager, whatever it is you're going into. You're going to be a battalion chief, you're going to be a deputy chief, you're going to be a fire chief. You need to be able to remain ambitious and focus on what is coming next. One of the things that I'm doing now is I'm working for a company called Quick Medic as their head of operations. And I've just promoted some supervisors. And one of the new supervisors asked me, I'm curious, what job can I have next? And because what I want to be able to do is prepare them for the next stage in their career. And I said, it's not what job you want next. It's what job do you want ultimately? So it's not where you go next that you take that step. It's the step that you take to get to your ultimate goal of where you want to be. I want to be an EMS chief. Well, maybe you shouldn't be in the clinical side of the business. Maybe you should be in the operational side of the business. Les Brown has a great quote. And if you're not a fan of Les Brown, check out his teachings on YouTube. But he's got a great quote that says, it's not that too many people aim high and miss. It's that too many people aim low and hit. So when you say to yourself, I want to teach at the state level, that's not your goal. Your goal should be, I want to be a national speaker. You have to be able to speak at the state level as that rung on the ladder that gets you to that national conference, that gets you to that national stage. And it's the same thing in your career. You may be an EMT, you may be a paramedic, but where do you ultimately see yourself in your career? And that's the goal that you need to be able to attain. Number 8, keep your head high. When something is right, when you do something right, great, keep your head high. Equally, when you make mistakes, keep your head high. And in my book, Ultimate Leadership, 10 Rules for Success, this is the book that I had to write. These were the rules that I had to develop to be a good leader, right? Because I was a horrible leader. I've talked about that before. And in that leadership, we would, in my career, I made a lot of mistakes and I made a lot of errors and there were a lot of lessons learned and I had a lot of failures and I had to develop rules to keep myself on path, right? So rule number 1 is never allow your emotions to dictate your actions. How the heck do you think I learned that rule? But anyway, when it comes to Tim's number 8 tip, keep your head high. Rule number 8 is experience comes from mistakes and mistakes come from lack of experience. We've been sold this bill of goods that we're not allowed to make mistakes, that mistakes are bad. Ooh, you made a mistake. But name the one thing that you ever did the first time you did perfect. Or more importantly, is the way that you start an IV or put a collar on or intubate somebody today the same way you did it when you first started in EMS? And the answer is no. So you are going to make mistakes. You need to learn from your mistakes. You need to make sure that you don't do those mistakes again. And I got to be honest with you. Once you realize you made a mistake, because of muscle memory, you may make that mistake a second time until it catches up to you and clicks. And it says, you know what, next time I see this, I'm going to do this instead. His number 9 is enjoy your time. To me, EMS is the best job in the world. I mean, we run into danger when people are running, whatever the cliches that we want to use here. But this is a great job to learn about who you are. We deal with stress. We deal with death. We deal with birth. We deal with people who are, in the worst way. But enjoy your time in EMS because there's a lot of experience that you can gain. You'll learn a lot about yourself. You'll learn a lot about people. You'll learn a lot about your partners. Number 10, seek out a mentor. This is something that's really, really important, regardless of the field that you're in. You need to be able to ensure that there's someone that you could pick up the phone and call and say, what do I do about this? Or let me tell you about this call. Let me know what you think about it. I did this just a couple months ago. I was trying to figure out, and I forget what it was, but it was escaping me on how to do the math on this calculation. It was something that was statistical that I was trying to figure out. Man, I don't remember it, but I got on the phone with Gary Ludwig. A lot of you guys know Gary Ludwig. He had a column with EMS World for a long time, and he's been on the show a couple of times. But I said, Chief, can you remind me how to do this? I just forgot how to do it. And he went ahead and took his time and said, yeah, remember, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this, and this is how you get to, that's right, right? But if I didn't feel comfortable with him as a mentor to say, Chief, can you help me out? How was I going to find out that information? Anyway, mentors are important. You have role models and you have people that you emulate that you want to be just like they are as an EMS provider. And when you surround yourself with people who are positive, when you surround yourself with people who have good knowledge and good skill and good experience. But here's one of the things that I will challenge you with. Just because a mentor or a role model says this is the right way to do it, doesn't mean that you take that information as law either. So once you find out what they have to share with you, go ahead and look it up and just prove it. And then what you want to be able to do is you don't share that knowledge with anybody else. Well, wait a minute, Chris, that seems kind of counterproductive. But here's what I want to give you as a gift. When a mentor shares a piece of information or a pearl of wisdom or a nugget, what you want to be able to do is take that and you want to be able to polish it and you want to be able to add to it. And that's what you share with the next person. You don't give them what someone gave you. You give them the better version of that advice and allow them to learn from you, right? And then finally, number 11 is focus on safety. I mean, Tim, this is a great one, and you are perfect. You are 100% correct when you say focus on safety, because this is something that we don't do very well. We are hardwired for universal precaution scene safety, but EMS providers are not great in maintaining scene safety. We may know that the scene is safe once we arrive on scene, but as the scene progresses, as the time on scene progresses, as it starts to break down, we are not very aware of what's going on around us. And that is just as important. So, but Tim, great article. We're going to go ahead and put the article in the show notes. But I got to tell you, I mean, this was something that I read and I enjoyed. And usually when I read these things, I sit back and I say, well, how would I add to this? And that's kind of some of the things that I did. When you start to talk about carrying a pen and shears and flashlight, that was the number one thing we talked about. I threw in that you need to make sure these things stay clean, right? So I want you to think about it. I want you to read Tim's article. And then I want you to think about what would you add to the tips that Tim is giving you? And how would you share this with your peers around, that you deal with every day in EMS? So, but this has been a really great show. I think it's awesome that we get to share some knowledge and get to kind of talk about some of these tips. But I would really like to know if there's one of these 11 tips that speak to you, go ahead and send us an email at the show at ems1.com. Tell me what you think about the tip. We'll get Tim involved in that. This is his article. He did a great job with it, and maybe it'll come out in the next article of everybody's opinions about these tips. But if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, go ahead and email us at the show at ems1.com. Tim Nowak, great article. Check out his article, which is 11 Keys to Success for the Rookie EMT. I'm going to add any EMT and any paramedic as well. For Kelly Grayson, I'm Chris Cebollero. We look forward to chatting with everyone again next week.